Listen to your breath.
Welcome. We're so excited that you're here. And please welcome author, humorist, and your bedtime storyteller, Dylan Brody.
This is called Layover 1. Daniel thanked the waiter for the cup of coffee. He peeled back the foil from a tiny plastic container of half and half and poured it into the dark liquid. He watched it disappear into the warm depths before using the spoon to stir with gentle circles and distribute the cream until the coffee took on the overall tone of a rich Mediterranean suntan. Distant PA systems echoed down the corridors, announcing flight delays, gate changes, final boarding. His father's plane had been scheduled to land just a few minutes earlier. Daniel had arrived early enough to find the Daily Grill, order coffee, get the coffee, and stir in the cream before he saw Paul coming toward him, smiling. Todd Bradley International Terminal at LAX provided stores and restaurants in the area outside the security checked spaces available only to ticketed passengers. The hello or goodbye anxiety of those dropping people off or picking them up, the undertone of disoriented tension carried by the travelers, or the subtle hostility of airport police and the fragile families with small underage kids always on the verge of meltdowns, combined to transform the generic storefronts and chain restaurants into an overpriced mall of the damned. Daniel's father seemed, as always, to be limping a little bit. His carry-on bag hung from his shoulder like the oversized purse of a 1970s disco queen. His smile projected joy at seeing his son, along with a sheepish apology for having to meet so briefly at the international terminal during a layover. As he approached, Daniel stood up to welcome him with a hug. He spread his arms wide for Paul and announced, "Firm embrace!" The narrative mannerism was one he'd copied from a Mel Brooks appearance on a popular television sitcom, but he was quite certain that it was not something his father would recognize. His parents lived in a tightly controlled academic bubble. Looking out through the iridescent dish soap lens of intellect, they gazed at a world cleansed of frivolity, of hopelessness, of mindless entertainment. They prided themselves on an utter ignorance of popular culture. Paul slipped into a chair at the table and asked, "Did you order for me?" "Didn't know what you'd want." "Same as always, Jameson on the rocks or scotch." "It's kind of what I thought, but for a while there, you were limiting yourself to red wine." "Yeah, that didn't really last very long." Paul raised a hand to get the attention of a waiter. After he had ordered, they sat silent for a few moments. Daniel turned his coffee cup slowly on the tabletop by pushing the little handle with a fingertip. "You're not drinking at all?" "I have to drive." Then, after a short pause, "I don't really drink much, ever." "Some kind of a problem?" "Nah, just I smoke a lot of pot and talk about marijuana legalization on stage. I don't understand." He half nodded acknowledgement as the waiter put a drink down for him. "If I smoke pot and talk about that and I drink too, then I'm just a partier who likes to be wasted. I want it to be very clear that it's a preference, that I have a drug of choice." "I don't always understand what you're doing, kid." "I know." Paul used his fingertips to turn his drink on top of his cardboard coaster. "You do that too. I'd never noticed I'd gotten that from you." "What?" Daniel said, turning the glass. Paul snorted. "I tell people I had no mannerisms at all until you were born, and then I started co-opting yours." "I strongly suspect I did not emerge from the womb squeezing my nose." I only do that when I'm in public and I realized I was about to pick it." "Yeah, I don't like to admit that. It's not my most appealing attribute." "I'm your father. You're not required to be appealing." Daniel shrugged. You have a show tonight? No, why? You seem awfully dressed up for drinks at the airport. Coffee. Right. My manager said I should always be on brand when I'm out in public. On brand. Yes. I don't always understand what you're doing. I know. Paul sipped. Daniel sipped. They both circled their memories, trying to remember all the things they had wanted to talk about while they had this little bit of time together. Paul said, "But you're okay though, yeah?" "Yeah," Daniel said. "No? I don't always understand what I'm doing. I can't tell you how much of a relief that is to me." Daniel wanted to ask what that meant. He did not. That did not stop Paul from answering. You give the impression that you know exactly what you're doing, that everything is calculated, planned. It makes me very uncomfortable. Yeah, you hate outlines. Exactly. Paul enjoyed being thoroughly understood from time to time. They're the death of spontaneity. I know, it's why I mentioned it. I find it comforting to know that you're as uncertain as the rest of us. Glad my terrifying, tenuous existence can provide you some comfort. Paul nodded. Now we're getting to it. Daniel squeezed his nose. Then he chuckled, realizing the mannerism had reminded him of one of the things he'd wanted to discuss with his father. I've stopped doing cocaine entirely. Were you snorting a lot? Something about the way he emphasized the word snorting suggested an utter lack of familiarity with it. Daniel knew that Paul had done cocaine from time to time over the years. The faculty cocktail parties had been awash in booze, hazy with smoke, and sometimes ran late into the night with self-certain, overconfident, long-winded monologues delivered by various tense-jawed, fast-talking hyper-intellectuals. Not a lot. I could never really afford it, more than I should have. I realized I was spending time with people I didn't really like because I thought they might be holding. Paul nodded, but he said nothing. I think I used to hang out with Kinison, Sam Kinison. I don't know who that is. Was. And then I gave you one of his albums before everything went to CD. Oh, yeah, the fat one. Yeah, he was heavy. Screams a lot. Screamed. Right. I hate his stuff. It's very angry and ultimately reactionary, if I'm remembering it right. Yeah. He died? Yeah. I'm sorry? Daniel shrugged. When you eat and snort as much as Sam did, you have to measure your life in pig years. Paul did not laugh. He waited. We weren't really close. I thought we were, but we weren't really close. I was at the outermost edge of his entourage. It made me feel like I was part of the comedy scene, but I was just partying with people who didn't want to hear what I had to say. I don't know what we're discussing right now. I keep trying to do all this stuff that made my heroes, and it keeps not leading me to where I want to go. I get to the right parties. I sleep with the right women. Who are the right women? Most of them. I don't think that's how you get there. I think where you want to get can only be a byproduct of doing really good work. I think that's a myth, Dad. I think that's an East Coast fantasy that revolves around an obsolete belief in an artistic meritocracy. I hate to think that's true. He took a breath that indicated he was about to say more, but then waved off the thought, inviting Daniel to ask what he had been about to say. Daniel recognized the breath and wave mannerism as it was one of his own. He obliged. What? I don't understand why you feel you should be rewarded for a life of hedonism. I like to think that a life of hedonism is its own reward. Paul chuckled. That's funny. You use that on stage? No, I just said it in response to. He thought about it for a moment and then said, I'm not at all certain it'll work on stage. You probably have a better ear for that than I do. Daniel nodded. But you're all right, though, yeah? Daniel wanted to say that he was not okay. He wanted to tell his father that he was a month behind on rent. that he wanted to break up with his girlfriend, but she had supported him for 6 months and he felt indebted. He wanted to tell his father that he had so little in his bank account that he couldn't make a withdrawal from an ATM. He wanted to cry. He wanted to be held. He wanted to be invited to come back to the East Coast and live in his old room and be taken care of. Yeah, I'm all right, he lied. Paul squinted for the amount of time it would have taken him to blink. It was a micro expression that meant he had spotted the lie and decided not to call it out. Daniel recognized it from his own face. He recognized it from the mirror, from the moments when he was shaving and caught himself pretending that he was a successful comic because he had a gig coming up in a month, or pretending that he was a successful writer because he had pitched a script 2 weeks earlier. Paul said, good, I worry. Then, after a brief pause, I should probably get going pretty soon. The security line for international flights can get long. Daniel nodded. Yeah. Okay. Paul sipped his drink. You need a couple of dollars for parking? Nah, I got it. He pulled out his wallet and slowly brought out his Visa card. I got the drinks, kiddo. I can buy. Nah, I got it. They made eye contact, Daniel making sure his father had intended to mimic his mannerism, Paul wanting to be certain that Daniel knew it had been deliberate. Daniel allowed his father to buy him coffee. It was a relief. He had not been at all certain the card would have gone through. That ends Layover 1, the first in the Layover triptych, the 8th story in the relatively painless stories cycle. At this time, I will stop recording so that people feel free to listen to your breath.